Take a look outside a window. What is the season where you are? How do you know? Most likely, you looked at a tree or plant and noticed details about its leaves and assessed the qualities of sunlight streaming outside. Observing the timing of biological events in relation to changes in season and climate is called phenology. When you notice the daffodil buds are poking through the snow and think spring is on its way, you're using phenology. When you see leaves turn from green to red, and watch migrating birds fly past, and realize that summer is over, autumn is here, you're using phenology. Literally meaning, the science of appearance, phenology comes from the Greek words, pheno, to show or appear, and logos, to study. Humans have relied on phenology since the time of hunters and gatherers. We've watched changes in seasons to know when to plant and harvest food and when to track migrating animals. Scientists observe and document seasonal changes in nature and look for patterns in the timing of seasonal events. Timing of these natural signs has remained consistent until recently. Increasing global temperature is causing rhythms of nature to shift. Bud burst, the day when a tree or plant's leaf or flower buds open, is occurring earlier in the year for some species. For every 1 degree Celsius rise in temperature, bud burst happens 5 days earlier than usual. Differences in timing affect not only plants, but the insects and birds that depend on the plants for food.
While a written word might have multiple definitions, we can usually determine its intended meaning through context. In speech, however, a word can take on additional layers of meaning. Tone of voice, the relationship between speakers, and expectations of where a conversation will go can imbue even words that seem like filler with vital information. This is where and come in. Or a and ehm, to toa and u, eto and ano. Linguists call these filled pauses, which are a kind of hesitation phenomenon. And these seemingly insignificant interruptions are actually quite meaningful in spoken communication. For example, while a silent pause might be interpreted as a sign for others to start speaking, a filled pause can signal that you're not finished yet. Hesitation phenomena can buy time for your speech to catch up with your thoughts, or to fish out the right word for a situation. And they don't just benefit the speaker, a filled pause lets your listeners know an important word is on the way. Linguists have even found that people are more likely to remember a word if it comes after a hesitation. Hesitation phenomena aren't the only parts of speech that take on new meaning during dialogue. Words and phrases such as like, well, or you know function as discourse markers, ignoring their literal meaning to convey something about the sentence in which they appear.
Carbon dioxide, or CO2, is the main greenhouse gas in climate change. So how does CO2 get into our atmosphere? Well, carbon is part of a cycle. It starts with the sun, which hits the Earth's surface with more energy in 1 hour than the whole world uses in a year. Plants, which are kind of like biological chefs, take that sunlight and then suck in some CO2 from the air, mix them together, and bam! They create a stored form of energy, in the form of carbohydrates, such as glucose and sucrose. The process is called photosynthesis. When animals like us eat those plants, our stomachs convert that food back into energy for our own growth. Greenhouse gases are a byproduct of this process and are released through waste. If those plants die, they decompose, and tiny microorganisms break down those carbohydrates and again release greenhouse gases as a byproduct. As you see, energy originates from the sun and is then transferred as it moves through the food chain. But sometimes, carbon-based organisms, like plants or animals, get stuck in the earth. When this happens, they're compressed under tons of pressure and turned into carbon-based fossil fuels like oil, coal, or natural gas.
The major currency of our reward system is dopamine, an important chemical or neurotransmitter. There are many dopamine receptors in the forebrain, but they're not evenly distributed. Certain areas contain dense clusters of receptors, and these dopamine hotspots are a part of our reward system. Drugs like alcohol, nicotine, or heroin send dopamine into overdrive, leading some people to constantly seek that high, in other words, to be addicted. Sugar also causes dopamine to be released, though not as violently as drugs. And sugar is rare among dopamine-inducing foods. Broccoli, for example, has no effect, which probably explains why it's so hard to get kids to eat their veggies. Speaking of healthy foods, let's say you're hungry and decide to eat a balanced meal. You do, and dopamine levels spike in the reward system hotspots. But if you eat that same dish many days in a row, dopamine levels will spike less and less, eventually leveling out. That's because when it comes to food, the brain evolved to pay special attention to new or different tastes.
Financial literacy is a vital skill that empowers us to make wise decisions with our money, crucial for our time in college and beyond. It is the compass that guides us through a sea of financial decisions, from student loans to budgeting for daily expenses. Firstly, understanding the basics of budgeting can prevent the common pitfall of overspending. It teaches us to differentiate between wants and needs, ensuring that our financial resources support our academic goals and well-being. A study by the National Financial Educators Council highlighted that college students who adhere to a budget experience less financial stress. Secondly, knowledge of saving and investing places us on the path to long-term security. By grasping the power of compound interest and the importance of saving early, we can plan for future goals, such as further education or starting a business. In conclusion, financial literacy is not just about numbers, it's about making informed choices that pave the way for a secure and prosperous future.